Oregon Transportation Research and for this seminar, we bring in some distinguished scholars from other parts of the country because there are a lot of times I think Portland can learn from elsewhere. Often it's the other way around. But in particular, this term, what we decided to do is focus on large-scale infrastructure because there's, in case, maybe if you've been paying attention, you've noticed there's some big issues going on in this region with respect to big-scale infrastructure. We talked about high-speed rail a few weeks ago. There's a bridge project going on in this region that I think you've heard about. And so we thought, well, what else might be going on in the country that we could learn from that experience? And we focused in on this project in New York State. So we invited Michael Anderson from New York State Department of Transportation to come here and talk about this Tappan Zee Bridge project. And we can hear what he has to say about the project. I want to remind everyone that we are webcasting. So when you do ask a question, and probably best to hold a lot of the questions till the end so we can get through the presentation. But when you do ask the question, use the microphones on the tables, hold the touch button, keep the red light lit while you're asking the question. If you don't have a microphone or a working microphone, we'll come around with this portable one to get your question. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dill. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to extend my personal appreciation and the appreciation of the entire project team to the university for allowing us to come out here and share our experiences with you. The Tappan Zee Bridge I-287 Corridor Project is a collaborative effort with no less than 3 separate state agencies in New York State: the Department of Transportation, the New York Thruway Authority, which owns, operates, and maintains the Tappan Zee Bridge and the approach highway system in Westchester and Rockland County, and the MTA Metro North Railroad. It's an odd gathering, to be sure. It's unprecedented, at least for the scale that we're working with, and I'm here to tell you this morning that we are making progress, and not many people would accept that. Just a very short overview. I'm going to give you a little bit of definition and background of the project. History is not really that relevant, except it does have a remarkable resemblance to what the folks on the Columbia River have gone through. I had the pleasure to meet with them this morning. We have a lot of things in common. Talk about, very briefly, a very unique environmental process that we've implemented to help narrow the focus and keep the project moving. Talk about the bridge, because the bridge, we owe a lot to the bridge, because without the bridge we're not in a position to talk about some unprecedented transit system improvements in this corridor. And then I'll get to the transit analyses and the decisions that have been made along those lines. To set the stage, the New York State Thruway system, Interstate 87, comes down to the border of New Jersey, goes across Rockland County, across the river, and then heads down and ends at the city line. The interstate system does continue across Westchester County, tying into I-95 heading up to New England. The Tappan Zee Bridge is quite literally the focus of the project. The bridge itself is 25 miles north of New York City. Most of the traffic that crosses that bridge, and we're at 140,000 vehicles now, 160,000 on holidays and certain weekends, it's through traffic. 70% of that traffic wants to do business in Westchester County or move on to Connecticut or up to New England. Only 3% of that traffic crossing that bridge finds its way into Midtown Manhattan. Although there is a very, very significant commutation to Manhattan, the people who live on the west side of the river take other highway systems further south and cross into Manhattan through the George Washington Bridge, some 20, 25 miles south. New York City is a choke point for through traffic from the south, from the west into New England. And anything south of New Jersey has been coming through I-95. It's a choke point. The extension of 287 in New Jersey about 12 years ago allowed an alternate route for trucks in particular to come north, miss New York City, come across Rockland County, and continue up to New England. But that is why the Tappan Zee Bridge is such a vital link in this transportation network. It's also connected to, as I said, the thruway on the west side. There's a 684, which brings north-south traffic tying into 84, which heads off into Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New England. It all operates as a network. In terms of existing commuter rail facilities, there are 3 major north-south lines run by MTA Metro North. One has its origins up in the city of Poughkeepsie, 75 miles north. Another in northern Dutchess, another 80-mile trip. And then the New Haven line, which runs up into Connecticut, is about 75 miles reach. On the other side of the river, there is existing service. It's called the Port Jervis line, which starts out in the western end of the eastern end of Pennsylvania, the confluence of New Jersey and Pennsylvania border. And commuters come across Orange County and then head into Manhattan through Secaucus in New Jersey or further south at the tip of Manhattan in Hoboken. There's another line that has its origins in Rockland County. The problem is there is very little significant east-west corridor transit capacity right now. So to that extent, the west side commuters are underserved by the rail lines. When you look at the commuters from the east side of the river, going to Manhattan, 85% take commuter rail. 85% commuter rail or transit. On the west side, only 10% take commuter rail or transit into the central business district in Manhattan. We're hoping that this improvement can do something to change that imbalance. In the 90s, the Thruway Authority had to come to terms with an aging bridge, a bridge that had a poor design to begin with, was certainly not anticipated to carry the traffic that it does, and it really needs very significant attention. Given that need for a major investment, smart people got together with the governor and other transportation officials and private sector people in the state, and in 2000 they convened a panel that said, look, this bridge probably has to be replaced, and we think that's the direction you should go. But the existing 7-lane bridge isn't going to cut it, but we're not going to build this into a 10, 12, 15-lane bridge because that's very problematic in and of itself. So we replaced the bridge, but we can't increase capacity significantly, so what do? We're going to implement east-west mass transit service to help with the congestion, but more importantly, provide mobility choices that do not exist today for the future. So we've moved forward on that premise since 2000. And again, this slide demonstrates 2 very distinct and significant markets which need to be served. You've got the east-west corridor for inter-county and intra-county, and that includes trips from northern New Jersey and into southern Connecticut that are happening now and want to happen at an accelerated pace based upon our demographic projections and our travel forecasts. Then you have what seems to a lot of people be the most obvious and significant market, west of Hudson and east of Hudson into the Manhattan Central Business District. One is no more important than the other. Both are vitally important for the region now and into the future. And we've come to grips with that and are managing that in the project. So how did we get here? As I said, the existing bridge needs a very major investment. The future traffic demands cannot be accommodated. Our 2030 projections for traffic will exceed 200,000 vehicles. That's on an 8-lane facility. If we modeled a 10 or 12-lane facility, those numbers would be all that much greater. Problem is, if you gave additional capacity on the bridge, it's going to become a very expensive parking lot unless you extend those capacity improvements through the approaches. And in this case, where the traffic comes from and wants to go is for most of that 30-mile corridor. So you're kind of defeating the purpose. You're feeding a fire that will just get more and more and more out of control. That's why we're putting a lot on the future of transit in this corridor. So the decisions have been made, and they're very significant. The project started in 2002, but by the end of 2008, we did a lot of rethinking and came up with a way for us to make critical decisions. We've decided the bridge has to be replaced, and I'll spend a couple of minutes on how we got there and why. We've decided on a new state-of-the-art bus rapid transit system to handle that east-west market demand for inter-county and intra-county trips. And we've settled on extending the existing north-south commuter rail service on the west side of the river in an east-west connection across the river, tying into the Hudson line, which has, they're working at about 50% capacity. That line of the three on the east side of the river has the most excess capacity and can handle this additional service from the west side of the river. Not going to go through this, but like the Columbia River and like most major projects, things take a very long time. And the reasons for that is many. Sometimes you have a good idea to begin with, and you don't know quite how to get to where you need to be. That's what happened here, in all honesty. In 2002, the Thruway Authority and the railroad company got together with Federal Highway and Federal Transit and said, we want to replace this bridge, we think, but we have all these options for transit. So they spent a lot of time with a very robust public participation phase, got a lot of ideas, and by the end of 2005, they came up with 6 alternatives. But those 6 alternatives were very complicated, and they involved different types of transit systems, including light rail. Now, light rail is very well advanced and obviously an important part of the transportation network on the West Coast. It's not the case in the East Coast. So introducing that new type of service and trying to integrate it with the heavy commuter rail was quite problematic. We came to a decision point in 2008 and made these decisions about the transit systems that we're going to pursue. But the bridge brought us to the table in the first place. We have a 3-mile bridge that between 1990 and today, the Thruway Authority has sunk an additional $750 million into just to keep it up to speed in terms of critical structural problems and maintaining its level of service, particularly without requiring any load restrictions on trucks. That's going to continue. That cycle will continue ad infinitum. So it's the opportunity we have to think about what else can we do when we have to undertake this major investment in the first place. We're going to incorporate transit. To get the transit right, to incorporate that into the project, you necessarily have to take a lot of time planning it out, working with the affected communities, thinking through all manner of impacts, all manner of development consequences, all on an eye towards sustained growth, and all in a state that has home rule, where the localities get to decide what gets done and what doesn't happen in connection with the transit services. So that's going to take a long time, but for every year we take, it's costing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of escalated costs for the bridge. On top of that, the process that the Federal Transit Administration has for projects to be evaluated and to become qualified for federal aid is very, let's just say it takes a long time. And there's a lot of intricacies involved. So what are we going to do? We've got to fix this bridge. That's why we're here in the first place. We want to get the transit right. That's going to take time. It seems like we can't catch a break here. How do we get this thing moving? Well, in consultation with our federal partners, we've decided to implement tiering. Now, tiering in and of itself is not new. It's been started in the 70s, they told me, where you have a Tier 1, which is a planning level of analysis, followed by subsequent Tier 2, which is a full-blown environmental impact analysis. Tier 1 gets you authorizations to proceed. You set critical components like alignment, logical termini, major important components of your design. And the Tier 2 is where you come in and settle on all the details. What we've decided to do, and we've got concurrence with our federal partners, is to do a Tier 1 design development and impact analysis concurrent with a Tier 2, which is the traditional analysis we need to go to permitting and construction. We're moving forward at the same time, planning for the transit systems and designing a transit-ready bridge and highway system. So that at the end of this process, we will have authorization to go, replace the bridge, make accommodations for the trains and bus in the bridge, and in the approach systems. To the extent we need to modify the approaches, we'll leave space, build a portal, what have you, so that the subsequent Tier 2 transit actions will result in those approvals where we can come in and implement that service. It is tantamount to changing the bicycle tire while you're moving. We pulled it off. We were certain that the concerned communities, politicians, would have thought this to be some sort of way for the agencies to back away from the commitment to transit. It is not. We were able to show them that this is the most sensible way to advance the project and the most likely path to success. So that's what we're in the process of doing in terms of the federal environmental process. The bridge, very quickly, give you context. It's an amazing bridge in that it's the strangest looking thing you've ever seen. It's 3.5 miles. It's got 2 curves. It's at the widest part of the river. Why would you want to build a bridge here? That will take an 1.5-hour seminar. Can't go there. But it's comprised of no less than 5 sections with 4 different structural types. And the reason for that has everything to do with at the mud line and below. The western half of the bridge, the low level, we call it a causeway. It's not a causeway. It's a series of 169 simple spans, 50 foot long. Why 50 foot long? Because the mud and muck is about 600 foot deep, and in 1952, when they designed the bridge, they said, let's keep the spans short to keep the load light. Let's have a very thin deck and keep our fingers crossed. They thought and accounted for having to shim the deck as there was differential settlement. It never happened. But again, I digress and get into, I'm showing my true colors as a design guy. The bridge, when opened in '55, had 3 lanes in each direction and an open steel grading mall area. 91 feet from out to out, giving us today a usable roadway width of about 87 feet. In 1993, the Thruway Authority replaced that center mall, made it a structural deck, and installed a zipper barrier that gets moved twice a day. What we need to accomplish in the replacement bridge is to eliminate that lane imbalance. So we're going from 7 lanes to 8 lanes. We are going to add 2 additional lanes for bus rapid transit, which may or may not involve an HOV or hot lane. We're accounting for it in the analysis as a BRT, HOV, HOT lane. We are going to install safety shoulders because the existing bridge alignment cannot change. Those curves are problematic. The grades are very challenging, very high percentage of trucks, and on this bridge, the accident rate is 4 times higher than the rest of the thruway. And the level of accidents are particularly horrific. And it's not the trucks that cause the accidents, it's the vehicles that hit trucks that are the problem. When I talk about horrific accidents, I'm talking about fiery infernos with high levels of loss of life. We're also, last but not least, going to make considerations for bike peds and non-motorized transit, which is not accommodated today. So that takes you from a 91-foot bridge to a section that wants to be close to 200 feet wide. Also, early on in the process, there was an assumption by the Thruway and Metro North, well, nobody would really want to rehabilitate this bridge, so let's just look at the rehabilitation option and then dismiss it because it just won't work for us. Well, we wish that life were that easy. In order to do a comprehensive analysis, you need to look at what do you need to do in a rehabilitation scenario that accomplishes the project goals and objectives, the same thing that you would get in a replacement scenario. So we evaluated what it would take to accommodate that new bridge section. And these three, option 2, 3, and 4, are representative of what it would take to maintain the existing bridge and then add to it, if you will, to supplement what's missing in the existing bridge. And what we looked at was a bus-only option or a bus and train option, both in rehabilitation and replacements. What we found out is that the amount of work necessary to do rehabilitation options compared to replacement options, the difference was, dare I say, insignificant. Can I say $200 million being insignificant? But the fact is, it really is. When you compared like scenarios, here's the commuter rail rehabilitation, $6.3 billion, and replacement, 6.4, 6.6, call it 6.5. Bus only, 5.1 to 5.2. It's not only construction costs and life cycle costs, it also, this analysis was very comprehensive, looked at environmental factors, in particular, involvement in the river. And the decision to replace the bridge has been documented and signed off by the federal agencies in a scoping update. Rehabilitating the existing bridge is not viable, it doesn't accommodate transit, and it does not address operational problems. The other rehabilitation options that do accomplish that require very extensive work in the river, just as impactful, and in fact, ironically, the rehabilitations are more impactful because of the need to maintain traffic. River impacts are comparable in all options, and all of the rehabilitation options will retain that main span and those approach spans, which will continue to deteriorate as long as they're in place. So this is now what we're studying in the DEIS, to oversimplify a single-level solution and a dual-level solution. Not dissimilar to this project that I visited out here this morning. Why 3 structures? Because we think it's highly improbable. If we were to design it as a single, any contractor in the world would want to come in and value engineer it. But more importantly, if we go with a single, which is about 100 feet wide, which is about 13 foot wider than the existing bridge, we can put the 8 lanes and buses on that half of the bridge, if you will, until the second half of the bridge is done. It just works out much better in that configuration. We also undertook in 2008 a very comprehensive transit analysis. The transit mode selection report was undertaken. And this also took into consideration not only the obvious transportation issues, but also environmental and cost aspects. So this is a very informed analysis. It's very comprehensive. The tools that were used to do that, federal guidelines require us to use the locally approved MPO forecasting tool. The MPO in New York that has jurisdiction on this project is called NMTC, the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. It's comprised of representatives from tri-state area, New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, 5 counties in the lower Hudson, 2 counties in Connecticut. The best practices model, the tool, has been approved by the feds. This model works on input from the 28 county metropolitan area. Okay, has all major and minor routes, all transit routes, buses, trains, subway systems, and it provides traffic and transit ridership forecasts for any or all specified links in that system. It's fed by the demographics, which are also provided by federal requirement of the MPO. That's the demographic, the growth pattern, the employment numbers, the job shifts, and what have you. So we're using the tools that we're mandated to use. This tool, this system is so encompassing that when we started using it in 2003, it took 7 days to do a run. After you set your inputs and made the improvements for whatever scenarios we wanted on the bridge or for whatever transit links or whatever new stations we wanted to add, it took 7 days to do that. Now with the strides that have been made in hardware and software, we're down in a 5-day run. Why does it take 5 days? It runs 25 million paired trips analyses for the AM peak. And it's for all 28 counties. So there's no question that we are capturing all of the pertinent influences for this model. We take it to a higher level of analysis for the 10 counties that frame that 30-mile corridor that we're looking at. We've calibrated this based on recent counts, and that gives us a better sense of confidence in what we're getting as output. It's also, I might add, the first time that this model has been used to forecast transit ridership on the scale that we have and we'll be counting on it for justifying what we're doing here. And all those steps that we've taken are not done in a vacuum. We work with the MPO. We go step-by-step sign-off from the federal co-lead agencies. We've even gone to Washington and gotten the FTA to sign off on the way we've set up the model and the way we're using it. So we feel pretty comfortable on those counts. As I mentioned, in 2005 and 2006, we had this, what amounts to a menu, if you will, of transit alternatives for the Rockland side, which is the west side of the river, and the Westchester side, which is the east side of the river. And we also remember mixing those two markets, the east-west inter and intra-county market, and the west of Hudson, east of Hudson, to the central business district in Manhattan. So we had no fewer than 6 active alternatives under consideration, combinations of transit. We had already dismissed 2 others. Full corridor light rail had been considered, and other combinations of light rail with buses and trains had been considered and dismissed. What we did in this transit mode selection report was to revisit those with an updated, calibrated model with an eye towards saying, let's stop playing games here. What is the transit system that will work best, that we want to move forward? And is that transit system that we will evaluate in the DEIS? You don't need a DEIS to decide what system you need that makes the most sense. And we were working at it from, in fact, we were going to undertake 6 EISs to evaluate systems that didn't warrant any further evaluation. Sounds very simple now, but unless you live through it and are responsible for getting somewhere and have to bring your federal partners along with you, it can take some time. But it was an exercise that was worthwhile because in the end, we are now comfortable with, and again, I'm just showing you this one measure here. This is ridership projections. We looked at air quality. We looked at time savings. We looked at cost benefits, cost per mile. Any measure you can think of, we've taken that into consideration. But all of the results reflect the general ridership trends. The combination of this commuter rail and new bus rapid transit system that we're now pursuing is going to give us, in our design year, 79,900 transit trips just on this system. That's in addition to the 200,000 plus that are on the Metro North commuter rail system every day. And in 2030, that's probably going to be up 230, 240. You know, I don't want to speculate. So this is not insignificant. And another point that we needed to make, especially from our critics and detractors, was this is actual ridership. This is not a capacity analysis. This is an actual forecast. In truth, the commuter rail numbers, if you put them into the FTA model today, the FTA would say this train's not a good idea because you don't have enough passengers. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is this train on day one is going to be about 40% capacity, which means we have that much more opportunity for additional ridership growth. And the buses, very, very flexible. Very, very flexible. Almost limitless in terms of capacity. I mean, how many buses do you want to run? But so this was a very comprehensive, even-handed, and very conservative approach to this analysis. Just for consideration, we were looking at one alternative that not only came across Rockland County, not only came across the river and connected to go to Manhattan, but also continued across Westchester to tie into that Connecticut line. That didn't perform as well as the bus rapid transit does in Westchester County because of the lack of stops, frequency, and what have you. But it was a $14 billion investment that represented for that 30-mile two-track extension. The combination of buses and trains that we are now advancing is in the neighborhood of $7.5 billion. Roughly $6.5 billion for the commuter rail and $1 billion or so for the bus rapid transit. Again, this is a snapshot if we were going to build this project, cost it out in 2012. When you look at the entire project, the cost of the bridge, the cost of the necessary adjustments to the approach highway systems, and the transit components, all in one, that's where we come to, and I'm not making it up, the numbers are, it's less than $16 billion. It's 15. It's a very famous number in New York nowadays, only $16 billion project. But I say, hey, I didn't pick the most expensive. You give me credit for not going for the $22 billion project. But that's where we're at. We are working with our financial advisors on a parallel track to come up with a financing mechanism that not only gets the bridge done, it's the highest and first priority, but is a comprehensive package for the entire project, including the transit. In our view, and no one's argued with us yet, and I don't think they will, this financing plan has to be independent of the three agencies' current and future capital and operating budgets. No agency can undertake this burden moving forward. So the revenue streams that are found and implemented to get this project done have to be new and they are not taking away from those other agencies. And in fact, to get this done in a 5-year time frame for the bridge that we want to, all three agencies' budgets wouldn't cover the annual budgets wouldn't cover the cost. So, that helps us in keeping us, quote unquote, honest in coming up with a truly dedicated revenue stream to get this project done. So the transit decision, again, I'm not going to read this to you. The facts are that moving forward, we're going to implement, we're analyzing these systems in the DEIS. We're going to do it in a tiered manner. We're going to follow immediately with the next Tier 2 transit study. Most probably the BRT alone, but it could be BRT and the commuter rail together. We've got time to figure that out. We will have it figured out by the time this FEIS is done. I use these to educate the public about what bus rapid transit is. When people hear bus rapid transit, they're thinking of the quintessential express bus, which is quite common in the metropolitan area in New York City. But as you know, or must know, this is a very different animal. And this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about an incremental improvement in the local express bus service. We're talking about a whole new system. The idea with the bus rapid transit system is to build this trunk line along the 30-mile corridor. The 30 miles was that yellow line in Rockland County, western Rockland County, to the end of Westchester County, over to I-95. That would be the trunk line where the buses can really make time in that corridor. Depending upon the alternative, there'll be 15 to 20 new BRT stations in that interval. But beyond that interval, feeder lines will extend another 30 miles, depending upon where they're coming from or going. So we're looking at implementing a transit system that can cover up to a 90-mile corridor in terms of buses. With the commuter rail system, yeah, we are going to be building a 15-mile track, two-track extension. But that's tying into an existing system that goes another 40 miles out to Port Jervis. And it also has connectivity to northern New Jersey. People from northern New Jersey, we could conceivably get New Jersey Transit to consider coming north and putting a spur to come across Rockland County on our new service. So even as defined, there is still potential to expand the system we're working on. And we are working with our partners in New Jersey and Connecticut. And quite frankly, their support moving forward is going to be critical to getting the necessary federal approvals and hopefully appropriate level of funding for this improvement. Again, I couldn't go into this. We could do an hour or so on the bus system itself, but this just illustrates, the black here represents the central core, if you will, and we're at this point contemplating approximately 15 feeder lines. That's what we're starting with. When we hand this off, whoever's going to run this can work with the local county governments, the local private operators that want to join the system, expand the system, what have you. So there's tremendous flexibility afforded by the bus rapid transit system approach. Now, when they're in our trunk line and in our stations in the trunk line, they'll work at the high-tech level with the level boarding platforms, with the offline fare collection systems, with the informational kiosks that give you the location of your bus and what have you. Those vehicles can operate in regular streets less efficiently, but that's how they'll operate in the feeder routes, at least initially. And again, the other important attractive aspect of buses is it can always expand at its own pace. The difference now in the EIS is how will these buses operate? They can run in dedicated separate busways. They can run in a shared use facility, in an HOV, HOT lane, or they can be in dedicated lanes integrated into the local street system. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. The commuter rail, what we're looking at, remember we're staying within the right-of-way with the commuter rail, the highway rights-of-way and the railroad rights-of-way. This service here from Port Jervis, this is the existing service down to Secaucus. Here there's a transfer where you can come over to Penn Station or you continue down to Hoboken. What we're talking about is extending service from the Hillburn Station and going across Rockland, adding 2 new commuter rail stations. There'll be multimodal centers in Rockland County, and then tying into the existing Hudson line, which I mentioned has plenty of capacity now for the future. With respect to where it will fit in our right-of-way, we're looking at median applications, and we're looking at, in particular, the south side. The thruway right-of-way is approximately 250 feet, and right now, for the most of the 15 miles in question, we have more than adequate space on this outside to run a 2-track facility. So we're going to settle on, because the rail has the least amount of flexibility, the rail wants to go where it needs to go, we'll situate the rail in terms of its alignment location. And then the variables to be evaluated in the DEIS are what BRT running ways will work the best, and what are those impacts. So the alternatives we are considering in our EIS, of course, is the no action for comparative analysis for the future. We're looking at 4 build options that all include the same commuter rail option. Okay? And the difference will be in how the BRT system will operate. Will we have a completely dedicated busway for the entire trunk line, entire 30 miles? We're evaluating that. What if we had a dedicated busway in Rockland County, and then we were integrated into dedicated lanes in local traffic in Westchester? What if we had the shared use HOV lane in Rockland County with the dedicated busway in Westchester and the HOV shared use on the west side paired with the in-street integration on the east side? So that's where we're at. Right now, we are in the DEIS production phase. We are doing the design year forecast analyses. We are doing the highway design. We are doing the environmental impacts. We're doing the comparative analyses. By the end of the year, the team will have a document ready for federal review, the draft EIS, if you will. Depending upon the length and outcome of that review, we're hoping to have public hearings and publish the DEIS next year, maybe this time next year. After the hearings, resolution of comments, in New York, it's our practice to then announce the preferred alternative and working with our federal partners, resolution of the FEIS, records of decision. In order to get this thing approved by the feds, ultimately, we, like everyone else, has to show how we're going to pay for it. So we're also working diligently on coming to terms with necessary financial plan decisions that need to be made. And it looks like we've got about another year before the study really needs the commitment. So it's not like we're going to, take our time for a year. It gives us another year to do whatever arm twisting or back to the drawing board scenarios that need to be done in terms of getting the commitment to the funding. For your edification, if you're interested or can't sleep at night, the website is up to date, fairly up to date, and it has all of the documents I spoke about and many, many that I didn't have time to cover available at the website, and we update it frequently. Questions?
We'll open it up for questions, and
One on the web that I think may be a point of fact. Are there tolls on the current bridge, and also if you consider
Yes.
congestion charging in the
The
future?
current bridge is at a $5 toll, and for about 8 years now, the Thruway has had a congestion pricing policy for trucks. The off-peak truck tolls are half of what they are during peak periods. Then the next river crossing, the George Washington Bridge, about 20 miles south, is currently at $8 toll. It's been at $8. Yes, round trip. You pay one way. It's been at $8 for many years, and I would bet $1 it's going to $10 pretty soon. The next crossing north, it's a little bit north. It's about 45 miles north. It's the Beacon-Newburgh Bridge, Route 84. That toll is $1. So we're going to have to work on some parity. Yes, sir.
Oh, I was wondering, along the corridor of the bridge, are there high concentrations of people living there that would generate demand for the BRT, or is that mostly going to be coming from the feeder buses?
That's an excellent point. I failed to get into the too much detail of the current demographic. Westchester County is very densely, highly developed. And in fact, White Plains is now undergoing redevelopment. Rockland County just crossed that 3-mile bridge, and it's very, very suburban with isolated, local development. The destinations now are in Rockland, in Westchester County, in terms of employment and non-employment interests, recreational shopping, what have you. Our projections show that Rockland County, and even more so Orange County, are going to grow dramatically. Westchester's growth is about 15% in 2035. We're talking about Orange County, upwards of 30% growth in terms of population. And I think it's about 20% growth in employment. So this is very much going to become a bidirectional corridor. Yes, ma'am? Sir?
Sorry, my microphone's not working. Go ahead.
So we're replacing a bridge here. You probably are aware, and there's been quite the public debate on what kind of What's the public's feedback in that area of the people that it's going to affect? What's the discussion look like? I'm just kind of curious. Like how many lanes? What's going on? What kind of buses?
Right. The biggest concern from the public and local politicians was the concern that we would try to build our way out of congestion. They're very much concerned about not widening the bridge. And we said, we get it, we understand. But if we're going to do that, you're going to create an expensive parking lot or cause problems elsewhere. And in fact, our projections are so significant, the growth is so significant. These 200,000 vehicles I spoke of in 2030 are coming to an 8-lane bridge. We also did a run for a 10-lane bridge, and it was like 228, 230. So the more you build, the more will come. And then it becomes a case of, how far do you keep widening? The answer is, and we're the DOT, and we got it. Transit is the answer.
So you're getting
We're not silly. It won't take the congestion from level of service F to C. That's not happening. We're going to have level of service F on this $5 billion bridge in the future.
Yeah.
But we're going to have options for those people who choose to take advantage of them. Yes, ma'am?
You mentioned a lot of the growth is going to be taking place in the future in the more suburban rural of Rockland County. Are you, and this may be kind of premature at this point in the stage, but are you anticipating some sort of accommodation for DOT and, dense development around these stations and these improved corridors?
Yes, transit-oriented development is something that is very important for the ultimate success. We've run these models absent any other growth for the future than what we're given, okay? So in order to make the most of it, you have to have a very well-managed, very well-coordinated, transit-oriented development approach. And it is the key to better neighborhoods and sustainable growth. One of the problems in Rockland and Orange County is it has been unchecked. The sprawl has happened out there. We see the implementation of this transit as a way to maybe rein that in and get smart about doing it in the future. As I mentioned very early on, New York is a home rule state. So it's up to the localities. We will build it. We will put a station. Those localities get to decide what to make of that. We want to encourage them to work with us. We've undertaken a training initiative. We cannot do the planning for them, but we've brought on the Project for Public Spaces to help us engage the community to understand that it's in their best interest to get smart on this and work with us. Sir?
I have a question about the climate impact. In the design, I read online that Governor Patterson formed various committees with the DOTs over there to incorporate the effects of climate impact. Like you are building a bridge for 100 years. During that period of time, the severe weather conditions, I have not heard anything about that. Could you shed some light in the design process that how you going to handle the rise in water level or severe heat and cold conditions?
Mm-hmm. With respect to climate change and those impacts, there are other agencies, other agencies that have or will have jurisdiction on establishing what that criteria is. We're very well aware of it. In New York City, there's a coastal management committee that's undertaking that precisely. And in New York State, there's a statewide initiative. I could dodge the bullet and say, we'll do whatever the Corps of Engineers tells us to do. But in fact, that's what we will do, but we are working with all of them proactively. In terms of the bigger question, certainly we can take it into consideration for what we do. The bigger question is that Hudson line that I referred to that we're tying into on the west side, on the east side of the river, that rail line is about 6 feet above mean high water right now. So there's a larger issue than, how high should our clearance be over the river. And there's more to it than that. The problem is we don't want to go setting new standards. We're going to let the appropriate agencies in New York State and the federal level guide us in that respect. Yes, sir.
So my question's on level of service. Do you expect level of service benchmarks of rail and BRT to be similar? And if not, do you have any tactics to improve both of those to, improve ridership, potential ridership?
Well, as I mentioned, our forecast numbers that show we'll have 80,000, about 30 on the new commuter rail service and 50 on the new bus rapid transit system. Those are at the very low end of the capacity. So those levels of service are very, very high indeed, almost to the point that they hurt the project. There's a school of thought that says if you're only going to generate that many people on the train, the project's not worth doing. We say, no, the project's worth doing, and look at the flexibility we have for the future. So these are not capacity numbers that we forecast to. These are actual forecast level of service. I don't know if that helps, that clarification helps with your question. Sir?
Interested in the institutional side. It sounds like the idea is that there will be, I don't know, for want of a better description, a Tappan Zee bridge authority or something that would operate the transit and also take care of the bridge. when this is done, you talked about not having MTA, for example, having to run the transit. How could you expand a little bit on what's being thought about on that and when the decisions get made?
Absolutely. My comment about that negative comment about the agencies was we don't want to impact their capital or operational budgets. We don't want them to have to take this on too. It's not decided. In my personal view, there's only one entity to run the commuter rail, and that should be MTA Metro North. We don't have a bus BRT system operator identified. And the assumption right now is that the Thruway Authority will continue to own, operate, and maintain the bridge. That said, it is critical that we understand how that scenario will work, and it becomes an important factor in the financing. We know that if we just raise the toll on the bridge, it can't even pay for the bridge. We need a $54 toll for a car and $434 toll on an 18-wheel truck. So we have to, if we're going to be looking at the tolls, is it the bridge plus what? We're thinking about that. And if we do expand it, and it stays on the thruway, well, we could stay with the existing system. What does a new authority give you in terms of flexibility? How to leverage assets? A lot of important questions. They're not settled, but we're driving to those now in connection with our comprehensive financial review. So stay tuned. Watch the website. Sir?
What's Federal Highway's attitude about opening a new bridge at a level of service F?
I never said it was level of service F. Didn't say it, but don't know what you're talking about. Federal Highway has signed on to the scope that limits it to eliminating the 4-3 lane imbalance. And they understand that there will be capacity issues in the future. The regional office, Region 2, Federal Highway in New York, has long accepted the notion that we cannot be building our way out. They like HOV lanes. They're very interested in how those fare in the analysis, particularly the comparative analysis between our HOV and dedicated busway only. The dedicated busway option, alternative, would not have an HOV lane. So that's how we're going to settle those questions. They also understand the futility, if you will, of trying to build your way out of congestion. Now, every project's different. If you have other situations where traffic comes in and leaves, and it's a localized issue, that's different. But I think that is not our case. Our traffic comes from multiple sources, and most of it, a high percentage of it is.
So we are, unfortunately, at our 1 o'clock, so I'm going to have to cut off our official questioning and also make a couple announcements before we thank our speaker. If you want to stick around later today, at 3:30 p.m., we have James McCommons, who's written a book called Waiting on a Train, The Embattled Future of Passenger Rail Service, a year spent riding across America. That'll be 3:30 over in the gallery on the second floor of the Urban Center. He'll be reading and signing. And then next week, we have Gil Hicks from Cambridge Systematics, who's going to come talk about the Alameda Corridor project. It's a large freight project in Southern California, so hope to see some of you there. And I really want to thank you for coming to New York and sharing your experience with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a hat in the corner. We take donations. Every little bit helps.